What is up and welcome back to Daily Drives. Now the keen-eyed viewer might notice that we are no longer in the warehouse today as we have already had the new Defender there. Today we'll be taking it on-road as well as off-road to find out if it's worthy of the name. Okay, so the 2020 Defender finally on road, and that is important to mention, on road, because this car needs to be a good SUV. With the growing market of people just buying SUVs all the time, it has to be competitive compared to what everyone else is buying, even if they don't take it off-road. A lot of people do buy cars that are capable off-road, but they don't ever use them off-road. They just like the way they look. And speaking about looks, this car looks absolutely fantastic. I love the white color and the mud flaps at the back, and honestly, this is the spec I would go for. This particular version costs around 30,000 dinars, and that is the base version, or as close as to the base version you can get here in Bahrain. It comes with the 4-cylinder P300 engine that will propel this car to 100 kilometers an hour in 8.2 seconds, which is quite respectable considering how much it weighs and the size of this SUV. Driving on the highway, it has been a dream. It's very comfortable to drive, and I never longed for more power unless you are a power freak and want to get the V6 P400. You always have that option, but at Daily Drives, we suggest just to get this one because it is really good enough. Driving on a bit of twisty roads here, and there is a bit of body roll, and that is to be expected from an off-road vehicle. However, it's still very planted, and you can kind of feel where the weight is going, and it doesn't surprise you. It's very easy to drive. The steering wheel is very light. Doesn't give you any feedback, but it doesn't really need to, as it's not a sports car. Overall, it's quite comfortable inside. Visibility is great. I have a commanding position. I can see everything around me. The wing mirrors are huge. The back, yes, you do have that tire in the way, but you can just flip this here and you have a screen from the camera that's in the fin behind the car. Speaking about cameras, if you are maneuvering around, and I'm just testing the turning radius, and it's really good actually for this kind of vehicle. You do have 360 cameras, and they are the clearest cameras we've ever had here on Daily Drive, so you won't miss a thing. Very intuitive to use, as well as quite good off-road, as Casper will be talking about later on in this video. And finally, we come to comfort. Yes, everything is nice and soft touch, and it does feel very premium, especially compared to the previous one, and even compared to some of its rivals on the market right now. But one thing I don't like are the seats. They're a bit too short, and I'm starting to feel my thighs hurt a little bit. Well, not hurt, but I'm feeling the pressure underneath them. And I can imagine that if I would take this car for a longer cruise or drive, it might get a bit annoying for the driver. So, unexpectedly, the Defender does very well on road, but for this to be a Defender, it has to be very good off-road. And for that, I have my trusty co-host Casper, a professional off-road racing driver here at Daily Drives, who will test it to its limits.
That requires me to start off straight away by fiddling with some buttons. So what I'm going to do now is go to the drive select for the 4x4 system, whiz through what terrain I'm going to be driving on. I'm not going to be driving on snow, I'm not going to be driving on mud, I'm going to be driving on rocks. So the car will now automatically adjust, but that will require me to put in low range, which is also what I'm going to do. See, all these things were not possible in the previous Defender. You had to manually shift your gear and hope for the best and possibly result in damaging your gearbox. In this particular car, there's a lot of faff that goes into making everything ready. But now, okay, low range is selected. The vehicle is at its top height. And now I'm going to simply drive off and hope for the best. And I'm going to start that by the hill descent system. So there's a small incline in front of me, add a little bit of power, but more than that is pretty much enough. And then the car will go down by itself without me even touching the pedal or the brakes. And I can prove that to you by doing this. And the car, as you can see, is still moving, just very slowly, which you can increase the speed if you wanted to, but at this rate, I am pretty comfortable. First part of the Defender does it well, it goes down a hill. Now I've finally descended into this valley of greatness, and I shall now proceed to continue on straight and show you how it works when it comes to articulation, because obviously that's where it is most important. The point of this entire monocoque chassis is for it to be incredibly stable and incredibly user-friendly when it comes to uneven terrain. And to be very honest with you, it does it so easily, it barely requires any effort from my side, because the body will just stay completely level while the wheels are doing all the motion with their independent suspension. Now, I won't pretend and tell you, oh, this car is possibly a good off-roader. No, we've already put it through quite some paces previously, especially now using and utilizing the tech it has. Right, now to give it some little bit of stink, I'm going to make my way up this little mountain, which I know for a fact some cars have attempted and have not been able to do so. Ready? Let's go. Right, some soft sand and some rocky terrain. Let me get everything on, and it just goes over there like butter. With the exception of now being a little bit stuck going through the softer sand. But this car is constantly finding grip, so it is still pulling me out. See? Hasn't stopped, hasn't run away, hasn't gone anywhere, just kept on trooping. Right, now the incline. This is like an S formation, so it is a little bit tricky for most cars, especially when it comes to articulation. But as you can see, I am hardly struggling. And when I say hardly struggling, I am not struggling. That's the problem. There are not enough terrains or types of terrain in Bahrain that can really offer a challenge for this particular car. As you've seen, I've just happily made it. This thing is ridiculously good. It is almost, it's too easy for this car. Come on, we need to create some rivers, create some, I don't know, forests, create something just to give this car a little bit of a run for its money, because as it is right now, it is just performing and outperforming us. Talking to a camera is fairly new to me and it is a little bit difficult. However, I've just crossed this terrain without even thinking twice. The car has done it for me, which again is going to be, oh yeah, well that's what the Land Rover does. Well, yes, it does. And it does it incredibly well without even hesitating once. Right, now that I've descended safely and gone over the unequal terrain, the one thing that is important, especially when it comes to it being a Defender, is it has to tackle just normal rough terrain quite simply. Now, I don't need to be in the off-road mode as usual. I can just continue going on sand, which will deactivate my low range because it is no longer required. And I'll just let the suspension do all the work. So, 30 kilometers an hour. And the body is pretty much as stiff as you'd want it to be, but at the same time really soft. So the wheels are doing all the work. The suspension is absorbing everything. I don't know if the camera is shaking around, but if it is the camera, I assure you. It's definitely not the car. And when we drove over this terrain with other vehicles, you'd be shaken into another dimension. Now, all this trickery, of course, does come at a price. And that is where it worries me, because die-hard Land Rover Defender fanatics will want every other argument to try and justify that, because no, my Defender with nothing can do exactly what this can do. Yes, we know, that's fine, but the point of this particular car is to shine on both off-road and on-road. I haven't put this car through its real paces just yet, and I'm going to do so. However, I'm still not convinced if Osama has managed to translate the message on how good this car still is on-road. So before we get to the nitty-gritty and things and start attacking some mountains, here's some more of him.
Thank you, Casper, for that off-road test. Now I'm on the road again, but these are B roads, a lot bumpier roads in the middle of the desert, testing the suspension and so on and so forth. We're gonna go to another location and find out what it's like on a bit of a bumpier road. And so far, the air suspension has proven itself to be absolutely fantastic. It is a really good setup, both on and off-road. However, there are a couple of things that when you start driving this car, you notice that aren't so great. The infotainment system, it is beautiful, it works very fast, very responsive, it's fantastic. The problem is its placement. It's quite far away from me if I'm sitting against the seat, and I sit quite close to the steering wheel compared to most people. So I really have to reach in if I want to change a setting or something, especially if I want to go to the main menu, where the button for that is in the left corner right next to the gear shifter. So I have to squeeze my hand next to the gear shifter and rub against it. Kind of weird to say. And on top of that, you have the climate control system below it, which obviously accessible with gloves. That's great, I love that, but it is also still quite far away to reach and not very intuitive, since you have to press one button to change another button. It changes the swivel. It's quite confusing for the first time once you get in it. On top of that, in terms of everyday livability, if that's even a word, the sound system is not too great. I'd expect a much better sound system in a car of this price point. But it's not bad, but I just expect more. The brakes are super sensitive. As soon as you touch them, it goes forward like that. And when you're on the road or the highway, you don't really feel it that much. But when you're off the beaten path on a B road like this, that's bumpy and has potholes, and you really want to kind of avoid them and slow down a lot, you really feel the bite because it's instant. And that's not too comfortable. It's something you have to get used to. So we're kicking up some speed on a bumpier road to see how the chassis and suspension kind of supports the weight of this car. And it's very graceful. It's amazing how well this car drives around here. It's very soft, it's very comfortable. So if you live in a country or an area that has a lot of bumps and potholes and all of that, you'll be happy to know that the Defender can go through them quite smoothly. So all in all, the Defender is pretty good on road. It's quite comfortable. If you can fit in these seats, I'm actually getting quite used to them now. And as well as the wind noise at higher speeds, but that is to be expected from a shape like this. You get massive amounts of practicality and space inside, and you can fit your whole family and go for a longer adventure with the amount of boot space you have in the back. But all of that doesn't really matter because you're not paying for that. You're paying for that and the off-road capability, because that is the most important thing that this car needs to do. Because if it's not good off-road, it's not a Defender. Back to Casper.
Now, one last challenge to overcome when it comes to cars like this and off-roading and going on various different types of terrain is soft sand, which is something that we have quite a lot of in this region. And for this car to be able to tackle this, I'm going to have to sorely rely on its little 4-cylinder turbo engine. Now, usually you would want something slightly bigger, but in terms of this car, I mean, straight to it, it just handles it. It goes, doesn't argue, keeps the power on very easily and very happily. Gives you some element of steer. Body still remains quite stable. And the moment you're across to the other side, it just looks at you and says, "Is that it? Is that all you have to give me, or do you want to continue some more?" I want to continue some more. So now what I'm going to do is go back and give it its final object and go uphill, because obviously soft sand uphill seems like a recipe for disaster. But in this car, as you can see, even with its little 4-cylinder engine, it really doesn't give it much of a fight. That's a Land Rover for you. Oh, there we go, up the mountain, a little bit of sand, here we go, power. And you hear that the traction control is fighting it the whole time, giving it more traction to each wheel. I mean, this thing is, it's too easy. And we're up. I love this thing. It just doesn't stop. But unfortunately, that's where I need to stop. Give you my final conclusion of what it's been like to finally physically test this car to its fullest capability. And I say fullest, that's again an understatement, because all the challenges we threw at it today were really no challenge. It just got the job done. Sadly, that's where the road for the Defender ends for me. Land Rover Bahrain has kindly given us this car to test on the road. And to be very honest with you, I am quite impressed when it comes to off-road. Osama did mention, obviously on road it does have its quirks and maybe a few things do happen, but off-road, this car definitely proved that it is definitely a Defender. And with that, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Daily Drives. Please comment down below and let us know what you think of the new Defender. And until next time, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you very much, and take care.